Hello, friend. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we'll be talking about the spell Hunter's Mark.
It's I just have the Darkest Dungeon Bounty Hunter point as the mark in my brain. That's a really obscure reference, but it's fine. Yeah, Hunter's Mark. I was supposed to be a Ranger feature, and it kind of became a Ranger feature down the road, but it's complicated. This one's messy.
I don't understand what you mean by Ranger feature. That it was supposed to be, and then it became one.
Yeah, we'll get into it. How about we start with what the spell actually does? That seems like
Let's
always a
do it.
great place to start.
Sure.
Okay, so Hunter's Mark is a first level spell that is Ranger exclusive. I'm sorry, Ranger and Oath of Vengeance Paladins, but mainly Ranger exclusive. It takes a bonus action to cast, which is big game. It's got a 90-foot range, A-okay with me, concentration for an hour. So it has a long concentration effect, which means you want to be not taking damage for long periods of time. Until this spell ends, you deal a bonus D6 damage when you hit a marked creature that you marked with your bonus action with a weapon attack. So you can just mark a ogre, shoot it 3 times over 3 rounds. They'll take a bonus 3d6 damage. Additionally, if the creature drops to 0 hit points before the spell ends, you can move the mark to a new creature with a bonus action, which means basically as long as you're killing the things that you're fighting, you can keep moving the Hunter's Mark around. Additionally, you have advantage on perception and survival checks to find the creature that is marked with Hunter's Mark. I have run this for a lot of Rangers. I have seen that text used once.
Yeah.
Upcasting it's actually kind of relevant. So upcasting it changes the duration from 1 hour to 8 hours if it's a 3rd or 4th level spell, or if it's a 5th level spell, 24 hours. Unfortunately, none of those drop the concentration requirement, which I think is the number one gripe that Hunter's Mark tends to offer. The reason that I preface it by saying this is basically a Ranger feature, I would say when you get to 2nd level as a Ranger, this should be one of the spells you're taking and should almost always be using one of your 2 spell slots. That's how important I think Hunter's Mark is to the Ranger class, because otherwise you're playing a worse fighter almost exclusively down the road. That's what the base Ranger stuff. That's what
Or
just
much
the stuff
worse spellcaster.
Yeah. You get, like, as a 2nd level Ranger, you have Favored Enemy and Natural Explorer, neither of which give you any bonuses to combat. 0 bonuses to combat things. You'd think Favored Enemy would. No, absolutely not. It just helps you find the things that you're trying to kill. You then get a fighting style, which normally is archery, sometimes 2-weapon fighting. That gives you 2-weapon fighting gives you a slight bump in damage, and that's going to be awkward with Hunter's Mark as the bonus action. This narrows Rangers down typically because of what's good in class. Taking archery because it gives you bonuses to hit, and taking Hunter's Mark because it gives something to do with your bonus action that adds damage to your class. This puts you sort of on par with Rogue, sometimes slightly better than Rogue, sometimes slightly worse than Rogue. You are getting in that damage range and becoming a competitive character at 2nd level with Hunter's Mark.
I mean, if you're archering, then you're staying out of the fray and less likely to drop your concentration.
Yeah, hypothetically. You come into the problem where 1 hour is normally more than one fight. You not taking damage in more than one fight is a much bigger question. Rangers aren't great at maintaining concentration. Like, you don't want to dedicate features to it. You don't dedicate feats or anything to it. And you don't have the best, like, con can be a decent score, but if you're not intending to take damage anyway, it's probably pretty low. So it's iffy as to whether or not it stays up at all. That being said, Rangers are also very good at hiding. You also get some tools that let you down the road as you get in your conclave and stuff, give you some better options at not taking damage. The reason I say all of this and sort of denote it as a feature because it's just that crucial of a Ranger spell, because it's a way that gives you damage that is outdoing the standard fighter's level of damage, right? Fighters get Action Surge instead of it. You get Hunter's Mark, basically. Instead of that, the Wizards of the Coast released the amended Ranger features, which I have a whole slew of thoughts as to how they presented this information, but the gist of it is they released a bunch of optional features that you could run instead of existing features in the player's handbook. Basically, they were like, yeah, we recognize we really screwed up with Ranger and that no one was using the early exploration features meaningfully enough to justify them existing in this way. So here's 2 more. And Favored Enemy, a lot of it's going to sound very similar, Bob. After you hit something, you can spend a bonus action to mark that creature, and then when you hit it, you do a bonus damage dice, which is just Hunter's Mark, except you have to hit it first. So I'm sorry, favored foe. I said favored enemy because they also didn't change the vernacular. They called both of them favored, and I get it backwards in my head constantly.
Oh, so all right. So the favored foe is different than favored enemy.
Yes, favored enemy is
Okay.
the one written in the player's handbook. Favored foe is the new, for a bonus action, you can mark something.
Okay, so they both exist. I was thinking
Both
maybe they
exist, yes.
changed favored enemy.
You would think they would do that in like an errata or something. Again, I've got a lot of complex feelings about how they handled it. But what's important, though, is that there are two separate features, and favored foe is an optional feature you can take in place of favored enemy. I'm pretty sure that is exactly how that works. It also just is optional, so maybe it's in addition to. I'm, to be perfectly honest, not entirely positive. I do know it's something that some rangers can get. This is where Hunter's Mark has gotten quite a bit worse in recent years because this feature exists. Because this feature exists, you now have more flexibility to say, well, I do slightly less damage than Hunter's Mark. It's a D4 instead of a D6. And I have to have hit the thing already. So shorter fights, this is a lot worse. Or against a series of smaller creatures, this is a lot worse. At the same time, it doesn't cost me a spell, so now I can use things on like Carpenter Barrage. I can use a slightly more, in the Ranger spell list, we've talked about a lot. There's not a lot of winners in the Ranger spell list. But you can use some of the other tools and not feel that bad about it. Concentration spells feel a lot better when you're not concentrating on Hunter's Mark. It's really puzzling to me that they went with this solution. And that makes Hunter's Mark in this really weird place. It's like a slightly better version of it, a feature that you can sometimes get if your DM allows. And that is a really weird spot to put a first level spell that was otherwise critical to the play pattern of Ranger.
Let me ask you this. Does favored foe stack with Hunter's Mark?
It does. The slight, conceivably you can do both. It require the core issue with that play pattern is you only get one bonus action around. And with only one bonus action around, if you wanted to move it around, you need to use a bonus action to move the Hunter's Mark to the new target, and then bonus action to favored foe it, which is 2 rounds of combat, which is a lot. For what is more damage, I don't know how much. Oh, also, I'm sorry. I pulled it up because I knew this was going to be complicated. I knew it was going to screw things up. You can't. And the reason you can't, and I misspoke earlier, I said this doesn't take your concentration. No, this does say you mark the enemy for 1 minute or until you lose concentration on this feature, as if you were concentrating on a spell, which means you can't have this up and concentrate on other things, which means this still isn't good with the other Ranger concentration options. And they didn't solve any of the problems that complex feelings. Yeah. So no, this does not stack. It does compete still. And it's still something I think you'll consider, because then it'll leave your spell slots open for non-concentration other things.
We've seen how great those are.
Yeah, listen. Yeah, it's you get good berry. I'm a big fan of good berry. Good berry is an underrated spell. And okay, you got good berry. That's a good one. But I'm drawing a blank on another good Ranger spell.
Either one of these. I mean, either one of these is using your concentration.
Yeah.
Leaving you open to use non-concentration spells.
Yes, so that's a-okay. But I'm just trying to envision another non-concentration spell I'd want to cast as a Ranger and drawing some blanks. They probably exist.
Yeah,
but
we'll get to those down the road.
Yeah, probably.
Now, what I think is, given that how hard we are on Ranger spells, what I think is criminal is that both Hunter's Mark and Swift Quiver require concentration.
It's cruel.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah. Oh, whew, is that awful? Yeah, that you get that Final Fantasy. You've been playing the Hunter's Mark Ranger out of the player's handbook. You've been killing things. People told you Ranger was bad, and you're like, nah, I'm doing just fine. I'm getting 3 longbow shots off a round, doing 2 D8 plus a D6 plus mod. I got a super sweet longbow. I'm tracking things like nobody's business. Oh, I lose all my D6s if I cast Quiver, huh? Oops. That's a bummer. Oh, well. Swift Quiver's definitely better than this.
One more thing I want to bring up before we continue. I did just check on both of these. Neither Hunter's Mark nor Swift Quiver has a range of self. So conceivably, other well, but they're both exclusive to Ranger. They could both, two Rangers could cast it on one other person.
So while we don't have a range of cell, the spell's functionality makes them only function for you. So
Really?
range of self is a target. So it says like if a spell doesn't have a range, it's typically range self. So like mage armor has range self, for example. I think unless it's touching, you can put on other people. I think it's just range self. In any case, you can't have like someone else give you a switchblade.
All right. Well,
You
now
can't
I'm
give
looking at
Hunter's
the
Mark to
Hunter's Mark.
somebody else.
Yeah, the range doesn't apply to. Yeah, it applies to the creature you're casting on.
Yes.
All right, never mind.
The target is the thing in the space.
Even if that idea worked, it would still suck.
Yeah, that's true. Listen,
Because
we've been really down.
Ranger, not being as rangery as you can.
Yeah, we've been really down on it. I want to give the Ranger players out there some love. I want to give the DMs that are DMing for Rangers some hope. If you're in the player's handbook, if you're not in the Tasha stuff, even if you are in the Tasha stuff and you're like, this is a D4 damage for only a minute that I get 2-ish times per long rest, that doesn't feel great. Hunter's Mark is perfectly serviceable. I think it is very apt to compare it to Sneak Attack, and because you have 2 first level spell slots, you'll often feel like a complete non-caster and just say, I have 2 uses of this hour-long duration Hunter's Mark. Favored Foe is only a minute, which is way worse. It only ever applies to 1 creature, and you get a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. It's either towards till short or long rest. I've read this thing like 3 times in my life. Long rest, so you get a proficiency bonus.
Oh.
Per long rest of favored foes. So you could have either 2 of those, or you could be willing to spend your spell slots on Hunter's Marks. Because they're competing in the concentration slot, you're like, well, I don't really need favored foe if I intend to be casting Hunter's Mark anyway. So I would probably push you to take Hunter's Mark anyway. It's just a little bit more of an odd question. But if you do, again, let's say we're in the world, you are taking Hunter's Mark, we're not competing with favored foe, we're saying, okay, I have my bonus action, I'm concentrating on Hunter's Mark, I'm playing this Ranger. If you're getting 3 or 4 shots per encounter off with this and getting 2 encounters off with this, that's talking like 66 damage for a first level spell slot, and that is exceptional. Getting 6+ hits off with a Hunter's Mark isn't always going to happen, but it is commonly going to happen enough, especially because you will almost always be shooting things whenever you're in a fight if you're a Ranger, that you will be getting damage that is worth it out of it. This is a spell that I compare very similarly. I mean, it's almost identical to Hex, except Hex has slightly better secondarily effect, I think. They're pretty similar in power level. Very infrequently are either of them going to matter. But they both give you an extra d6 damage whenever you hit things. The difference is this is in a class that innately gets multi-attack. Whenever you hit level 6, level 5, Hunter's Mark just gets way better. You can still try to do 2-weapon fighting builds where your objective is to have an 18 dexterity, light armor that is giving you plus AC. You're taking the defensive duel, or you're taking like the feats that give you bonus AC, so you're not taking damage, so you can maintain concentration on your Hunter's Mark. You're also juggling the bonus action of offhand attacking versus Hunter's Marking, but you can conceivably be turning out extra d6s each round if you set up with 2-weapon fighting. You hit with the main hand, it does the main hand damage plus a d6. Hit with the offhand, it does a offhand damage plus d6. That's doubling up the effectiveness of Hunter's Mark. You need less rounds to make it really good. You're just putting yourself in a lot higher risk scenario, and you're having a little bit harder of a time juggling around your bonus actions. It can get messy. It's going to require a player that is very engaged and ready to fumble and have some things fall apart sometimes for that character's playstyle to really shine, because there will be some fights where you're like, yeah, it's been 4 rounds and I've done 86 damage with this thing. What are the rest of you chumps doing? And that's going to feel really cool. And it's going to be just off Hunter's Mark, right? Because then you also have the bunch of bonus damage you get from the short swords or whatever else you're attacking with.
All right. Are we done?
I mean, we can be.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's still so much to unpack. It just feels like,
There's a lot
I don't know. It's a really cool spell. Like, conceptually, yeah, kind of wish it didn't require concentration, because it could be really cool, or it could really suck if you get an unlucky hit against you.
Yeah, if you go into a round of I mean, you'll always get 1 d6 out of it, assuming you hit. So you mostly will always get 1 d6 out of it. That's a really low floor, though. That's not something we're really proud of. At the same time, if you're playing a safe character, if you're playing the ranger with the longbow, if you're playing the ranger with, I mean, if you're taking crossbow expert, the variant human or some nonsense, and you're able to find a way to juggle that bonus action in, you can Van Helsing it up and do 46 damage at range around to some big thing and be the monster slayer. That can be really cool. It's just not. It is going to almost always feel very samey, especially because it really encourages you to not get hit because of that concentration. If you're a DM out there, or if you're a ranger out there and you're like, man, I am struggling. The DM wants to have, and everyone else wants to have, these really big punchy fights where everyone is able to take damage. There's a bunch of varying threats. I feel like I just can't function because I can't maintain concentration on anything. I'm only doing just less things than my fighter friend. I would really ask and recommend drop concentration on Hunter's Mark and just let one be up at a time. Just you can have one concentration, you can have one Hunter's Mark up at a time. That's it. And then you can use it without concentration. It really doesn't feel that busted because it's, again, very akin to sneak attack. You can find ways to make this not feel terrible. And the fact that we're trying to, like, it won't always feel terrible if you're playing the longbow ranger, if you're playing the ranged ranger where you're able to do things, if you're really invested in the tactics of it and you're okay feeling terrible every once in a while and want to have the big Nova stuff with the 2-weapon fighting stuff, you can get there sometimes. But if you want to give it a little bit extra help, just drop the concentration. It'll make a world of difference.
Yeah, it will make a world of difference. And that's why I'm not sure if I agree with that. That feels like throwing a big wrench into the works. But what do I know?
It's an easy fix if you really want to make the Rangers better. If that's not interesting to you, it is a perfectly serviceable spell as is, but
yeah, all right. Guess that's that. You got a rating for this one?
In the best circumstances with this spell, it is doing a lot of damage. There will be some tables where you'll have a sharpshooter ranger that is using Hunter's Mark for an extra 3.5 damage around or per shot, and the damage numbers stack up really fast. And for that, I think it probably deserves a 4. This is a spell that can be really brutal on some characters, especially like if you walk up to a table with a DM running like a level 1 ogre big bad, and they're playing the crossbow, the variant human dual wielding crossbows with a Hunter's Mark, whose only goal is to shred as much damage on a level 1 character as they can. This spell will hit like a truck and make a lot of other builds feel like, oh my god, I didn't do any damage. That's where I think it deserves the 4. Long scale game, it's basically a balancing factor that keeps you in line with where Rogue's damage tends to be at, keeps you in line with where Monk's damage tends to be at. Not wildly game warping, but something you should probably think about as you're DMing.
I think it could be wildly game warping depending on how focused the player is on their character's build. I think this is one you could really build a really cool character around. I'll agree with your 4. I'm tempted to go higher, but yeah, the concentration eats it for me. But yeah, man, if we ever get into character builds, I'd really like to see a nice Hunter's Mark Ranger build.
Multi-tech Ranger is pretty sweet.
Yeah. All right. That was Hunter's Mark. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it. A gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.